When the world gets loud, when the chaos of daily life clouds her mind and the noise of expectations drowns out her desires, there comes a moment of silence, a pause, a breath, that sacred space where the heart speaks what the mouth never dares. And in that silence is the one she remembers. Not the one who said the most, not the one who shouted his worth, but the one who left her feeling seen, respected, safe. You want to be unforgettable. Then stop performing. Start being, because in a world that constantly asks her to explain herself, defend herself, prove herself, what she craves isn't someone louder, it's someone solid, someone who listens without interrupting, someone who witnesses without invading, someone who doesn't chase validation because he already knows who he is. Be the one who honors her boundaries without needing a reason. Because respect isn't a reward, it's a reflection of your own discipline. And trust me, she watches how you treat the waiter, how you respond when you're told no, how you act when you're not the center of attention. She doesn't remember the flash, she remembers the foundation. The way you made her feel safe to soften, not pressured to perform.
The way you made space for her voice.
Not just her body. The way you stayed grounded when everything else tried to knock her off balance. And no, this isn't about being a nice guy. This is about being a man of substance. The kind who leads with strength, not control. The kind who doesn't just take up space, but creates it. Not just someone who touches her, but someone who touches her life. Because when the world quiets and she's alone with her thoughts, she won't be thinking about empty compliments, power games, or superficial charm. She'll remember how you made her feel in her skin. How her silence wasn't awkward with you. It was sacred. How she didn't have to shrink or dim or pretend.
That kind of presence.
It doesn't demand attention, it commands it. And it's not built in a day, it's built in your character, in your consistency, in your emotional fluency, in your ability to stay when it's easier to run, to listen when it's easier to talk, to stand still when everything in you wants to chase. So here's the challenge. Don't aim to impress her when she's looking. Be the one who stays on her mind when her eyes are closed. Be the peace in her chaos. Be the respect in a world that objectifies. Be the strength that doesn't crush, but protects. Because when the room is quiet, when the voices fade, when she finally exhales, that's when your presence will matter most. And if you've done it right, that's when she'll remember you. Now ask yourself, will she? There's something you need to understand deeply before any true intimacy can ever begin. A woman's body does not respond fully where she does not feel safe. This isn't just about physical safety. This is about emotional safety, psychological safety, spiritual safety, the kind of safety that tells her without a word, you're allowed to be all of you here. Nothing you feel, nothing you say, nothing you reveal will be used against you. That's where real intimacy begins. That's when her guard drops, her energy softens, her body responds not because she's obligated, but because she's free. She doesn't want to brace herself every time she's touched. She doesn't want to wonder if her vulnerability will be held or weaponized. She wants to melt, not because you made her, but because you never forced her. And that only happens when she knows that every part of her, the soft, the wild, the uncertain, the bold, is safe in your presence. When she doesn't feel emotionally safe, she protects herself. And when she protects herself, she withholds, not because she's cold, not because she's disinterested, but because somewhere inside, her nervous system is telling her, don't open up here. And you might not see it on her face. She may smile, she may laugh, she may even pretend to be okay. But her body always tells the truth. Her body knows when it's being seen versus when it's being scanned. Her heart knows when she's being held versus when she's being handled. And if she doesn't feel emotionally secure, you'll feel it too. The tension, the hesitation, the disconnection behind the kisses, the withdrawal after the touch. So many people try to create intimacy with seduction, with technique, with physical touch alone, but what makes her ache for you, what makes her want to come closer when the lights are off and the world is quiet is how she feels when she's near you. Does she feel emotionally safe? Can she breathe around you without shrinking? Can she speak without filtering? Can she cry without being seen as weak? Can she disagree without fear of punishment? That's the real foreplay. Emotional safety isn't a prelude, it's the foundation. You want her to be wild with you? Make sure she never has to question whether she's protected with you. You want her to let go? Show her you're the kind of presence she doesn't have to guard herself from. When you create emotional safety, you create a space where her feminine can trust, where her nervous system relaxes, where her sensuality wakes up without being chased. There's something unspeakably powerful about being the one who makes her feel like she can exhale. Not because everything is perfect, not because you have all the answers, but because your energy says, you are not too much for me, because your voice says, your truth is safe here, because your actions say, your body is yours, and I will never cross a line that hasn't been opened with consent. The truth is, a woman in her fullest expression doesn't need permission to be sexy. She needs permission to feel safe. And that permission doesn't come through control or commands. It comes through consistency. How you speak when she's upset. How you respond when she's unsure. How you react when she's emotional. Those are the moments where she learns whether she can soften or whether she has to protect herself, even with you. This is where most people fail, not because they're unkind, but because they underestimate the weight a woman carries, the need to always be on alert, the expectation to always manage how others feel, the pressure to always be desirable, agreeable, digestible. So when someone finally enters her life, who doesn't demand a performance, she feels it. When someone finally shows her, I can hold space for all of you, not just the parts that please me, she doesn't forget that. There's a difference between physical closeness and true intimacy, between touching her body and reaching her soul. And the bridge between the two is safety. Because only in safety does she stop performing and start surrendering. Only in safety does she start telling the truth instead of what she thinks you want to hear. Only in safety does she go from pleasing you to inviting you deeper into her world. And when that happens, when she feels safe with you in the deepest way, her sensuality stops being an act and becomes an offering. Not given out of fear, not performed out of duty, but shared from a place of freedom. Because when she feels protected, her body doesn't just say yes, it says more. When she knows she can trust your energy, your presence, your integrity, she opens wider, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, energetically. Most people focus on what they can get from intimacy, but the ones who become unforgettable are the ones who focus on what they can create within intimacy. And what you create, moment by moment, is the atmosphere she breathes. And she breathes you in long before she ever lets you in.
She doesn't want to show.
If she doesn't want effort, that feels like effort. She doesn't want the heavy, over-polished performance of someone who's trying too hard to be chosen. What she craves, often quietly, often secretly, is presence, real grounded, attuned, masculine presence. Not charm, not lines, not technique, just presence. The kind that doesn't rush to impress, doesn't need to dominate, doesn't fear silence. The kind that makes her feel like there's nowhere else you'd rather be than here, with her in this exact moment.
She feels the difference.
Instantly, between someone who's acting turned on and someone who's actually tuned in. The ones who impress her temporarily are the ones trying to stimulate her body without knowing her energy, but the one she remembers, the one she can't stop thinking about when the night quiets down, is the one who was with her, fully, without distraction, without agenda, without proving anything. You don't need to be a mind reader to unlock her. You need to be present. You need to pay attention not to just her words, but to her breath, her rhythm, her shifts, her stillness. She'll tell you everything you need to know if you just stop trying to impress her and start witnessing her. You don't have to know the perfect thing to say. You don't have to guess what she wants next. All you need is to be so grounded in yourself, so attuned to the energy between you, that you can feel what she's asking for, even when she says nothing at all. That's what presence does. It makes space for her to relax. And when she relaxes, she softens. And when she softens, she opens. Not because she's been persuaded, but because she's been felt. And once she feels you, not your script, not your persona, but you, her body begins to trust you in a way that can't be replicated with words. There's a kind of man who walks into the room and instantly draws attention, not because he's loud, but because he's here, fully here, with his spine straight, his gaze steady, his energy calm. He doesn't fidget. He doesn't chase approval. He doesn't fill silence with noise. He knows that the most powerful thing he can offer is his undivided awareness. And that kind of presence doesn't just attract her, it awakens her. Because presence is the antidote to everything she's exhausted by, the pretending, the performing, the pleasing. She's tired of being around people who look at her but don't actually see her. She's tired of lovers who rush through the act of connection while skipping the actual intimacy. So when someone finally meets her with full presence, when someone finally stays instead of jumping ahead, it hits different. She breathes differently. She moves differently. She responds differently. That's when real intimacy begins. When she no longer has to carry the moment, when she no longer has to guide the connection, when she can just be wild, soft, emotional, intense, playful, unpredictable, and know you'll still stay present, still stay grounded, Still stay right there with her. That kind of connection isn't created through force, it's created through depth, through the courage to stop trying to be what you think she wants, and instead to anchor yourself so fully in your truth that she can feel it radiating from your touch. Your hands don't need to move faster. Your voice doesn't need to say more. You just need to stay emotionally open. Stay physically present. Stay curious about what her energy is doing and how yours can meet it without overpowering it. A lot of people perform desire. They rush, they escalate, they want to get there fast. But what she wants more than speed is substance. And when you slow down enough to match her pace, not just physically, but emotionally, you give her permission to feel safe in her own skin. You let her know without needing to say it, you don't have to go anywhere. You're not ready for. I'm not here to race ahead of you. I'm here to be with you, right where you are. Presence is what allows you to lead without forcing, to hold without gripping, to move without manipulating. And when she feels that, when she feels you are grounded enough in yourself that you don't need to prove anything, she lets go. Not for you, for herself, because you've created the kind of energetic safety that invites surrender, not demands it. This is where intimacy turns into something sacred, something unforgettable. Because when you're present with her, you're not just there for the act, you're there for the experience. You're not just touching her body, you're joining her energy. You're not just creating sensation, you're cultivating connection. And in a world of distraction, that's what stays with her.
Not the clever words.
Not the practice moves, not the superficial charm. It's the way she felt completely held, fully seen, and deeply met without you ever needing to chase her. She feels everything, even the things you think you're hiding. She knows the difference between a hand that reaches with care and a hand that reaches to take, between touch that says I'm here and touch that says I want. Her body has its own memory, its own language, its own intelligence. It will always respond or resist, not just to how you touch her, but why. When you touch with intention, something powerful happens. Walls fall, tension melts, desire deepens. But when your touch comes from expectation, pressure, or entitlement, even the softest gesture can feel like intrusion. She's not counting how many times you reach for her. She's measuring how it feels when you do. Does she feel held or handled? Does she feel honored or hurried? Does she feel chosen or consumed? You don't have to be perfect. You don't need years of experience, but you do need presence. You do need patience. You do need to touch her like she's not just a body, but a whole world. And here's the truth. She can feel if you're touching her to get somewhere, to unlock a reaction, to claim a reward. She can feel if your hands are asking her body to speed up instead of listening to where it actually is. Her sensuality, her surrender, her longing, those are never old. They bloom in spaces where pressure is absent and intention is real. There's a kind of magic in being touched without an agenda, without an underlying question of what comes next. She notices when your touch lingers just to be near her, when your hand rests without pulling, when your fingers explore without rushing toward climax. That's when her nervous system starts to settle. That's when her body stops bracing. That's when the deepest kind of intimacy takes root. Because now it's no longer about reaching a goal, it's about experiencing the moment. She wants to feel like your touch is speaking to her, not negotiating with her. She wants to feel like you're touching her with her, not at her. And that only happens when you let go of outcome and lean into curiosity. What's her breath doing? What part of her just softened? Where is her energy opening and where is it asking you to pause? The answers won't come from your head. They won't come from memorized tricks or time sequences. They come from attunement, from slowing down long enough to actually notice her, from realizing that what turns her on the most isn't what you do, it's how deeply you're aware of her while you do it. Touch is one of the oldest languages in the world, and yet so many have forgotten how to speak it fluently, because they've been taught that touch is a means to an end, a shortcut to sex, a way to escalate. But when your touch carries the energy of reverence, not urgency, she feels safe to stay open. When you touch her like she's sacred, not a checklist, her body opens from the inside out. And she wants to be touched that way. Not just touched because she looks good, touched because she matters, touched like her boundaries are respected, like her rhythm is honored, like she doesn't need to earn gentleness with compliance, like she doesn't need to perform to deserve patience. You see, touch becomes transformative when it's led by listening, not by assumption, not by habit, but by moment-to-moment awareness of who she is, what she needs, and where her heart is. Because sometimes, the most intimate touch is the one that holds her without asking for anything in return. Sometimes, it's the one that lingers after she's spoken a truth she didn't know she needed to say. Sometimes, it's the hand that stays even when the moment turns vulnerable, emotional, or uncertain. If you want her to remember you long after the lights are out, it won't be because of how far you went. It'll be because of how deeply you cared. Because you weren't just there to take, you were there to feel. Because your touch told a story of presence, not pressure, of respect, not demand, of deep listening, not fast seduction. And yes, her sensuality is wild, powerful, electric, but it doesn't need to be unlocked with tricks or tension. It needs to be invited gently, patiently, reverently. Every inch of her body has a memory. Every place you touch tells her something about how safe she is, how seen she is, how held she is. And when your touch says, I'm with you, not I want something from you, she leans in, not out of duty, but from deep, magnetic trust. She remembers the hands that didn't just want her but valued her. The hands that asked with patience. The hands that paused when she needed space. The hands that returned without needing reward. Those are the hands she aches for in the middle of the night. Not because they took, but because they gave something rare, something real, something deeply wordlessly intimate. There's a moment every woman instinctively feels. It's the subtle shift when someone is no longer connecting with her, but trying to control her. It doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't even have to be spoken. It can be the smallest change in tone, the expectation behind a compliment, the pressure behind a kiss. She notices when energy changes from inviting to demanding, when the space that once felt like hers now feels like it belongs to someone else. And when that happens, she doesn't just shut down, she retreats emotionally, sensually, and energetically. What she truly craves in intimacy is not control, it's attunement, the kind of quiet leadership that doesn't need to dominate, but simply holds. She wants to feel you grounded, not grasping, leading, not pushing. She wants the strength that doesn't come from tightening your grip, but from expanding your presence. Not a man who needs to control her to feel powerful, but one who is powerful enough to give her freedom and still be trusted. Control might get attention in the beginning, but it never creates devotion, and certainly not deep intimacy, because every time she senses that her yes is being assumed instead of asked for, something inside her starts to armor up. Her mind disconnects, her body stiffens, her breath shortens. She's no longer sharing herself. She's surviving the moment, and that is the exact opposite of what true intimacy requires.
There is a sacred difference between pressure and protection.
She responds to the one who protects, not just her body, but her choice, her timing, her energy, the one who doesn't try to direct her like an object, but holds space for her like a mystery to be discovered. The one who sees her not as something to be conquered, but as someone to be witnessed, unfolding at her own pace, in her own way. And here's what most people don't realize. Respect is deeply erotic. Not the watered-down version of respect that means being polite, but the soul-deep reverence that says, I see your autonomy, I trust your timing, I won't force what your heart isn't ready to offer. That kind of respect is what opens her, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, energetically. It's what gives her permission to come forward with her full self, not just the curated pieces she thinks are acceptable. She doesn't need to be handled, she needs to be honored, and you can only do that when you no longer make her surrender a requirement. You never demand surrender, you earn it, through consistency, through softness that holds strength, through the quiet leadership of someone who doesn't need her to rush past her own boundaries just to make him feel secure. That's the kind of energy she remembers when the room goes quiet. That's the energy she trusts. Leadership in intimacy is not about taking control. It's about taking responsibility for your energy, your presence, your intentions. It's about guiding the moment, not with force, but with feel. Leading in a way that says, you don't have to collapse who you are to meet me. I'll meet you right where you are. And when you show up like that, confident, calm, attuned, something in her exhales. She doesn't have to second guess her reactions. She doesn't have to anticipate your disappointment. She doesn't have to make herself smaller to feel safe. This is where real intimacy becomes possible. When she senses that you aren't trying to manage her, but simply hold space for her, that your strength is rooted in restraint, not in how far you can go, but how much presence you can hold when nothing's happening. Can you stay open when she pulls away? Can you stay grounded when she hesitates? Can you still offer warmth when the moment doesn't unfold the way you hoped? Because the truth is, intimacy is not linear. It's not a straight line from desire to connection. It's waves, it's emotion, it's pause and pulse, it's moments of fire and moments of stillness. And the ones who know how to be with all of it, the uncertainty, the shifting energy, the vulnerability, that's who she stays with. That's who she surrenders to. Not because she's been pushed there, but because she's been guided there. Gently, respectfully, with presence, not pressure. When you don't control, she relaxes. When you don't demand, she trusts. When you don't rush, she deepens. Her sensuality isn't something to be forced open, it's something to be invited out. And that invitation is accepted only in the presence of deep respect. Respect for her, no, for her silence, for her slow unfolding. Respect for her body as a living expression of her truth, not a vessel for your ego. You don't need to prove yourself by how far you can take her. You prove yourself by how clearly you can hear her. Not just her words, but her breath, her stillness, her shifts. That's where the real language of intimacy lives, in the moments most people rush past, in the pauses most people fill, in the spaces where control is replaced with attunement, and power is measured by how gently it can be held. She wants to be undressed, not just from her clothes, but from the weight she's been carrying all day. She wants to be stripped, not of her body's layers, but of the armor she wears to survive in a world that demands her to be everything for everyone. Before her body opens, her mind must feel held. Before you reach for her skin, you have to reach for her spirit. The deepest intimacy always begins long before the bedroom, and it always begins in the mind. She wants to be seen and not just looked at. She wants to be heard and not just listened to. She wants to be mentally met by someone who doesn't just know her surface but touches her inner world. When you show her that her thoughts are valuable, that her words matter, that her mind is just as captivating as her curves, that's when desire begins to stir in places she can't name. That's when her body starts saying yes before you ever lay a hand on her. Mental foreplay is real. The way you speak to her, the way you respond to her emotions, the way you hold space for her ideas, the way you challenge her thinking with kindness, all of that builds tension. All of that fuels attraction. All of that prepares her to let go. Not because she feels seduced, but because she feels safe enough to surrender. And that kind of surrender doesn't come from pressure or pursuit. It comes from a connection that starts above the neck. It's in the way you make her feel when she talks about something she's passionate about, and you look at her like she's the only thing in the room. It's in the way you remember the small details, the things she thought you'd forget. It's in the depth of your curiosity about her. Not just what she does, but why she does it. It's in the way you let her mind stretch, wander, express, and never make her feel like she has to shrink or simplify to be desired. So many people skip this part. They want the fire without tending to the spark. They want the climax without the buildup. But her sensuality is tied to her mind. She responds to energy, attention, detail. When you flirt with her intellect, when you stimulate her imagination, when you speak into the quiet corners of her heart, that is when her body begins to trust that it can follow. Because her desire isn't just physical, it's emotional, psychological, energetic. And it begins with the question, do you see me? The most erotic thing you can do is make her feel like her thoughts are a doorway, not a detour. Engage with her, they're fully, playfully, intentionally. Ask her questions that show you're not trying to crack a code, but build a bridge. Reflect back what she says in a way that shows you're not just hearing her, you're feeling her. Touch her with your words. Let your tone soften when she shares something vulnerable. Let your gaze linger when she reveals something that matters. Let her know that her depth excites you as much as her curves. That's where the real connection lives. That's when she stops performing and starts participating. Because now it's not about achieving something, it's about experiencing something. Now it's not about moving fast, it's about moving with her. Her mind becomes the first place you explore. Her thoughts become the foreplay. And the more seen she feels in that space, the more open she becomes in every other space. She wants to know that when she breaks open, you won't look away. That when she shares something messy or contradictory or complex, you won't reduce her. She wants to feel emotionally naked before she ever gets physically bare. And when you show her that her mind is a safe place with you, that her intelligence is not intimidating, but intoxicating, her body begins to relax, her desire begins to bloom, her energy begins to wrap itself around yours. You don't need to be a poet or a scholar. You just need to be present. You need to care about the world inside her as much as the shape of her waist. You need to show her that intimacy for you is not just about how her body moves, but how her thoughts move you. You need to show her that seduction isn't just something you do. It's something you become through your attention, your curiosity, your ability to hold space for all of her. Mental intimacy is where the deepest kind of fire is born. It's what makes the physical connection feel electric, alive, sacred. It's what makes the moment unforgettable, not because it was wild or dramatic, but because it was real. Because you weren't just there to take, you were there to know. And in being known, she opened, not for performance, not out of pressure, but because something inside her whispered, finally. There's a kind of stillness most people never experience because they're too busy trying to perform, too busy trying to keep the moment alive with motion, noise, escalation. But the truth is, stillness is often where the most powerful intimacy lives. It's in the space where nothing needs to be said, nothing needs to be done, and yet everything is being felt. And she knows the difference. She can feel when you're truly there with her, in that silence, or when you're simply waiting for the next thing to happen. Stillness asks for presence. It asks for patience. It asks for a kind of confidence that doesn't need to fill the space, but knows how to hold it. And that kind of presence is rare. It's the presence that tells her, you don't need to keep giving me something. You don't have to keep the moment interesting. You are enough, right here, just as you are. After the laughter quiets, after the tension releases, after the rhythms slow, what remains is the truth of your energy. And if your energy is calm, grounded, trustworthy, she'll feel it in that stillness. Her body will feel it. Her heart will recognize it. She won't need to entertain you. She won't feel like she has to shift or adjust. She'll exhale, not just because she's relaxed, but because something in her knows she's safe. When you can hold her in the quiet, you show her a different kind of strength, not the kind that charges forward, but the kind that remains, not the kind that conquers, but the kind that anchors, because anyone can move fast. Anyone can act excited, but it takes something deeper to just be without reaching, without rushing, without trying to turn the moment into something it's not. Stillness is where trust deepens. It's where she sees whether your connection was about the chase or about presence. It's in the way you breathe with her, the way you stay when the moment slows, the way you trace her skin with quiet reverence, not hungry urgency. It's in the way your energy says, I'm still with you, even now, especially now. And that's when her body responds differently. That's when her nervous system finally lets go. Because you're not just present in the highs, you're present in the in-between. The pauses, the slow unfolding of something that doesn't need a performance to feel alive. She doesn't want to be touched out of habit. She doesn't want to be held like a routine. She wants to feel your attention in the spaces most people ignore. The moments after, the breath before, the softness that comes once everything else has quieted down. She wants you to notice her when she's not trying to be noticed. She wants to know that even in silence, you're still there listening, feeling, attuned. Stillness is not absence. It's a different kind of presence, a deeper one, a more vulnerable one. And it requires you to be anchored in yourself, to not be looking for validation, to not be seeking distraction, to not be afraid of the moment when the intensity fades and what's left is just you and her. No filters, no flash, just truth. Most people skip over stillness. They try to fill it with words, jokes, movement, escalation. Because stillness can feel like exposure. It can feel like nothing is happening. But that's a lie we've been taught by a culture that fears intimacy. Because in reality, stillness is where the most happens. It's where connection is proven. It's where your ability to hold space becomes a language she can trust. It's the moment after you've kissed her slowly and you're still there forehead to forehead breathing with her. It's the way you stay wrapped around her after everything else is done. Not because you have to, but because you want it. It's the way you let her fall asleep against you and your presence doesn't retreat just because the conversation has that kind of stillness. That is what makes you unforgettable. You don't need constant movement to keep intimacy alive. You need presence, you need awareness, you need the kind of confidence that isn't threatened by silence, the kind of maturity that knows the body needs rest just as much as rhythm, that the heart opens widest, not in performance, but in peace, that the deepest parts of her don't come out when the volume is up, but when the world goes quiet and she realizes you're still there. She'll never tell you this directly, but she pays attention. She notices the man who lingers, not out of obligation, but desire. The one who holds her without needing to do something. The one who stays present, not just in pleasure but in the gentle afterglow that follows. The one who doesn't try to escape the silence but welcomes it, makes love to it, understands it. Because for her, stillness is sacred. It's where she stops being on, where she stops protecting, where she stops performing. It's where she starts being fully, softly, completely. And when she finds someone who doesn't fear that part of her, who doesn't try to fill it, fix it, or flee from it, that is the one she'll remember. That's the moment that lingers. That's the intimacy that leaves an imprint far deeper than anything words or motion could ever reach.